Hello, Victoria, Singh-Thompson, and welcome to Director's Notes, where you are premiering your film, Don't Forget to Go Home. So it's a really wonderful coming of age story that really sort of captures the messiness of growing up. And there's a lot of things that I could relate with as well when I was around that age, just about 10 years ago. So I wanted to start with the reason, perhaps why you made the film, because you wrote in the submission that this was based on a world you can't quite shake. So I was wondering if this is the kind of story that you needed to tell as opposed to one you just wanted to tell.
Yeah, it's a story that in the sense that as I came of age, I noticed that the experience of coming age was different to what I saw depicted in the experience of my family and my cousins, in the sense
Mm-hmm.
of balancing two different extreme worlds and sort of just the visual sort of world in which that was. And I just, when it came to like making films, it was just something that I really wanted to see depicted on screen, and something that I had a real like burning desire to like put into the collective consciousness and like Australian storytelling. It was really from a place of just wanting and needing to sort of speak to how one can be between worlds. And I know that is almost like
Mm-hmm.
cliche, but in the sense of just, I think that's just so important for like a second generation, first generation migrant experience. And I think not being like judgmental of that, and I never wanted it to feel too like one was better than the other. I think I just wanted it to be a place of just saying for what it was, and like the ride of that and taking it on a journey. And it's just when I started to go to parties and stuff, the juxtaposition was something I could never shake. And whenever I would go to a party, there was always a family gathering or there was always something on. And in real life, you would never, I mean, if you did miss or leave a wedding, there would be very severe consequences, but I kind of like
Mm-hmm.
that, like high stakes to it, you know? So yeah, it's just something that at film school I just had to do. And didn't get to make it at film school, but a bit later. So yeah.
And so you say it's one of the first stories that features a Fijian Indian diaspora perspective in Australia. And of course, Australia is a country that has, well, basically it's founded by immigrants. And in the last, since like 80s and 90s, there's a lot of people coming to the country, immigrating. Do you think that this is a perspective that's perhaps lacking in Australian storytelling? Because apart from indigenous perspectives and then historical, maybe white perspectives, I don't really see these kind of stories in Australian filmmaking. Do you feel like it's something that is lacking?
No, 100%. And I think that comes from like a class sort of disparity.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the immigrants in the 80s and 90s didn't have sort of the freedom to like pursue, filmmaking or something. And
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like only now the next generation's able to sort of, off the back of, what our parents have sort of done, is like be able to pursue these sort of artistic pursuits and like put still through our ancestors, like put those stories on screen. And I think, I feel like even now it's still really not seeing as much as I would need or want to in the current industry. But I think it really comes down to sort of the lack of like support and understanding, even from just like the film school level, of
Mm-hmm.
different sort of needs and cultures, and like making sets and the industry a more like inclusive, diverse place. Because I think a lot of people drop out of it and never get to actually make the stuff that they should be making, which is just sad. But I feel like things are changing, and there's like a small group of people who are making things outside of the dominant culture here. So
Yeah.
it keeps going.
And I love the way that it opens with this music, which kind of gives off the idea of a wedding before we see Asha running away. So we don't see the wedding, but obviously there's that presence there. Was it important to have it more in the background, so you really like foreground her experience, but also letting us know that there is something there? So tell me about the way you decided to frame that kind of opening sequence.
Yeah, I feel like weddings in themselves are such a joyous occasion, and I
Hmm.
wanted to sort of show that her focus isn't there at all, and sort of that sense of running from it. And it was really important that the film started with just leaving that and sort of leaving it sort of ambiguous as to what may have happened or how they were feeling in that. But I knew if that was visually on screen, that would sort of take the audience's attention away from her journey. So I wanted it to really start with just sort of a whirlwind of, escaping and running and leaving.
And this sense of energy is really well expressed in this opening music as well, which is kind of like a techno dance music, but then it has some traditional Indian vibe to it as well. So what was it like finding the right music for that moment? Was there any difficulty in finding it, or did you have a song in mind already?
Yeah, well, that song, it was sort of about Shiva and like sort of entering the darkness and dance, and I needed the lyrics to actually relate to the story, but also be that sense of the meshing of like cultures. And I really love like Indian like EDM, so that was kind of important. I had like a flow back into it through the like diegetic soundscape, but when they're actually at the rave, it had to be very like sort of, I wanted it to be more sort of Western techno, but I just wanted it in the actual film soundtrack to have that sort of sense of, and also like a precursor to what's going to happen as well and the world that we're in.
And there's this amazing contrast between what the two sisters wear, which are the traditional saris, and then the clothing of the friends, which is far more, I guess, hipster, especially with the fishnet top. What was the challenge like in costuming? Because there can be a challenge in costuming when it is so-called everyday clothes or clothes for a night out as opposed to something more technical. What was it like trying to find the right clothes for your characters?
I mean, I kind of had such a idea and vision of it that I never actually got a stylist. I just did all the costumes myself and bought it all for them and did the fittings, because I really wanted the sisters to have sort of like a correlating palette and then to like change their outfits. And I think clothes is such an important way of expressing one's identity. And I wanted Nat to have sort of a much more sort of like, very traditional kind of Western hipster techno sort of outfit, and then sort of like play on it with like Asha's like taking off like her coat and sort of them on the train like changing their costume. And that was really important, that I think people give away themselves in what they wear. And especially that's really important, obviously, for coming of age, where people experiment a lot with clothes. And it was just sort of a very quick visual way also to just express the themes of the story through their costumes, bringing in this culture to this space, sort of like heightened in a way. And that was really obviously intentional. And I think it's just, a quick read for the themes of the film as well.
So when I go on a night out, sometimes the best part is actually the anticipation, or as English we call it, the pre-lash, pre-drinks. It's just quite interesting, where you feel like anything's possible. And I think you really capture that quite well when they're about to go out and they're on the train and you can feel like it's something's really massive is going to happen. What was it like trying to capture that feeling in the film itself? And like just all these like little details was important to try and accumulate them in order to really get people into their zone and their feeling of emotion as well.
I wrote a little paragraph of, what they were doing on the train, but most of that was sort of just like improvised between the actors and sort of just giving them tasks to do and props and just playing with the props. And then with the extras on the train, sort of just like having them play with them. And it was just about sort of capturing all the silly things you do and really feeling like you're sort of at that age, you're like sort of like the center of the world at that moment. And it's sort of, I wanted them to take over the space a little bit. And at the same time, sort of bringing out the dynamics between them. But it is, it's almost like the anticipation of going somewhere is better than actually being there, which is what it feels like. I just also really wanted to capture that feeling before you go somewhere, It's so exciting.
And the two sisters managed to capture this push and pull between tradition quite well. So I was wondering what it was like in the casting process. Did you have like a long casting process, or did you have the right actors sort of in mind beforehand?
I sort of did a call out on like Facebook groups and sort of emailing different. I like emailed various people and just sort of did it an audition process, and then found Monica first and then found Remenika afterwards, and sort of played them against each other. And it was sort of it was quite a long casting process. And then once I had it right, I sort of then just did rehearsals and sort of got them to do scene work and sort of like sister work together to build up that sense of them having a bond and sort of a power dynamic between them, like that big sister and the younger sister who really looks up to her and will do anything she does, and the older sister being annoyed by that, and just sort of building that up so that whenever we went to a location or something, we could just sort of bring out that dynamic.
And was there anything that you pulled specifically from personal experience?
I didn't really realize it at the time, but now it's definitely based on me and my sister, as well as my two cousins, who would also go out and party together. So it was just like a combination, like a combination of the four of us put into these two characters. And I think there's something to be said about, you know, even though is that sense between like family and your like, you know, your teenage life and everything, your sister and your siblings are part of your family, and but they are also part of your sort of teenage rebellious side. So I think that's actually quite interesting, that I think people in your family your own age are actually going on this journey with you. And I think that is trying to give a sense of like, I don't think family has to be this thing you're against. It can be something that is still a part of you and is like evolving, you know. And I think that's like, that transition between generations is important to capture. And I didn't want Asha to feel like that character was too much of an isolation, and it wasn't. I think it was important to have someone else there, and I think he was going for the same thing, just in a different way.
And tell me about the logistics of shooting in a nightclub and making it look authentic. I really like the strobing effect you have, where it sort of cuts to black and then to light again. Was this a difficult scene to pull off? And then maybe you could tell me a bit about the kind of equipment you used to shoot these scenes.
We decided for the rave scene to have different colors for different moments and different lighting effects as we journey through it, because it's also like non-verbal. So it was really important that for like the Nang scene that we had sort of, I think it was like a sky panel or an LED that they used to like, they had like a dimmer and going in and out. And we also used in the edit sort of, you can cut to black and decide, and you can cut between the takes because of the fading in and out. And then for like the freeze frame strobe moments, we did a technique where we slowed it down to like 100 frames per second, but got people to do freeze frames at the same time. So it's still motion, it's still capturing kind of information, but people are still like frozen. And then I would get them to like change position, so they were like statues, but we would cut between it on the strobe that was happening. And I think we just used some like LEDs for that. So it was like a combination of like frame rate and lighting, and also just getting the speed of the actors and the blocking to do things that weren't quite, you know, normal time, to create those effects.
Cool. And was this a nightclub near you? What was it like trying to find the right location for this?
I mean, that warehouse is somewhere I used to go and party all the time. And one of the ideas of that scene I came up while I was there at that warehouse. And I've always just really loved that space, and just asked the owner if we could please film there. And we shot it in the middle of the day and just blacked it out and got some extras. And we didn't actually have that many extras, but we found a way to sort of put them all in line through the camera so that it looked like it was a full warehouse, but it actually wasn't when we were shooting. But I really love that space, and sort of, you don't have to do too much. And a speaker company was really lovely to like give us some like party lights, and they already had the decks set up for a party they were going to have the next night. So we were able to get a shot with someone like DJing when we wouldn't have been able to afford to actually hire all that equipment. And we also shot in the bathroom there as well. And it's just kind of the perfect space. So I just sort of took from my own sort of party experience and just wanted to set it in the real thing, because I hate sort of films that don't feel authentic in that way.
Yeah, I was going to ask about this because there are many films where they go clubbing and then it becomes this sort of very clean, very simple thing where they're instantly transformed and they're a new person and the ecstasy hits and then suddenly everything is aligned. But in your film, it's not. There is the potential for things to go wrong. For example, the scene with the kissing scene where one of the girls admits, actually, I'm too high for this, and it doesn't go perfectly right. Was it important to have this kind of moment where you see, okay, going out and clubbing can be a really, really fun thing, but of course it's not perfect and these things do happen. And just to get that kind of detail right, how the night out can also be like highs and lows as well.
Yeah, no, I feel like that was really important to show that I don't think, partying isn't just some sort of like, you get to the dance floor and it's all great and wonderful. I feel like there are dynamics within the dance floor. And I feel like if I could go back and shoot it again, I would probably bring that out even more. Just all the sort of things that can just suddenly turn it into a really not great night. And, there's like a whole world on the dance floor and in these spaces that aren't great. And I think it's important to show just the realities of like, it's like an extreme physical space. So things, like you said, can go wrong and there are lows and highs.
And after they get out of the club, the light changes quite dramatically and it's quite a cold, harsh morning. I was going to ask, what do you think will happen to her when she comes home? I feel like the parents will be very upset, but then of course they will have to forgive her because she's their daughter after all. But it was left on a sort of cliffhanger. So what do you think happens to her next?
The reason I didn't show it is because I didn't want to turn it into like a complete sort of angry Indian mother stereotype that you see a lot. It's like I wanted, even though the reality is they would be in a lot of trouble, but I feel like that just starts up a whole nother story. And in my head, a few more things happen before true forgiveness is achieved between the family and Asha. I feel like the journey is still continuing. I feel like the voicemails kind of give an indication that she is still very tough. And I think, at the end of the day, they just want her home and safe. And I like the idea that maybe they all stayed up and then they just fell asleep waiting.
In the UK, we have this film, which was a massive deal for representation, but then maybe there was some stereotypes. Do you know Bend It Like Beckham?
I love it. Yeah, it's a great film.
Is this an influence at all on how representation can be done? Of course, Australia is very different from the UK, but I felt like that was a film about a girl pushing back against parents and stuff, but then maybe the parents themselves are a bit thinly drawn. So is there sometimes a danger of falling into certain stereotypes? And what's it like trying to make sure you don't fall into them too much and create something that is truly authentic and maybe more universal to being a young person in general?
I mean, it's such a classic and so iconic and such a groundbreaker because it was just like the first time we ever saw that on screen, really. I think me and my mum watched it over and over again when I was little. And it's like, that does what it does for the sake of comedy. But I feel like, moving forward in terms of representation of migrant mothers, I am aware that like, strictness and anger and, holding onto tradition are aspects to that. But I feel like it's more complex than that. I do intend to hopefully make this film a feature one day. So like writing the mother character would be much more of a sort of exploration of like the reasons why that might be and making it more complex than that, I think is important to like push that representation into realms of like true naturalism and realism.
And so talking about the potential feature, have you written a script or do you have some ideas of what else it could be able to explore?
I've written a few outlines. It's mainly sort of continuing the identity exploration of queerness and the sense of trying to fit into the world, and sort of focusing on Asha and her sort of, you know, her love of Nat. And, there's a bit more to the wedding, and sort of, it's very like inspired, I guess, by, American Honey and the Virgin Suicides and those sorts of um, films. And I was rewatching Mississippi Masala the other day with Miranir's like commentary, and just the way she kind of was trying to like visually explore all these different cultures trying to mesh in one film. I think the feature would be much more about the melting pot of the western suburbs of Sydney, and about different cultures kind of interacting and in the one place, and outside of, the kind of upper class of Sydney, and sort of the effects of that. And I think it would be a film about trying to feel okay with who you are,
Cool, because it is really diverse, right? You have people from Greece, from the Balkans, from the Philippines, from South Asia as well. So there's an amazing melting pot, which I haven't really seen in Australian films. So that would be really cool to see. I would like to ask you also, what else are you working on next?
I'm working on a short film called Teacher's Pet, that's sort of a spiritual sort of adaptation of Lolita, but set in a Catholic all-girls high school, about a young girl who has a crush on her teacher, but begins to sort of unravel and become disassociated to her surroundings, and you begin to question whether she's actually being groomed. So it's sort of a film that's going to be sort of an experiment into how you depict dissociation on screen through a child's point of view, and sort of going into the complexities of like the process of grooming. Yeah, it's kind of dark, but I'm really excited about that one.
Cool. I can't wait to see it. And of course, feel free to submit it to Director's Notes. So finally, I'd like to say thank you for joining us on Director's Notes, Victoria. It was a real pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.